kind of scared everybody in the world yesterday, 2 days ago. And then Pat McAfee came out and was like, hey, it's COVID toe, messing around with the whole COVID toe thing that Aaron said on his show before. What do you think this is after knowing more in the last couple of days by seeing Aaron's foot? I was told it was blisters. I was told that, and I know how it is to play quarterback in summer or in the beginning of summer. You get bad blisters on bad socks, new cleats, a lot of movement for quarterbacks. I heard it was that, but you brought up some interesting perspectives as to what to think about after he is recovering from a very, very interesting procedure.
So initially when I wrote that tweet, I realized that I thought he was addressing his right ankle or his left ankle, and then I realized it was actually his right ankle. So then I kind of got rid of it because you could see both his cleats are off, and he has his one. And then now here you can't see what the hell's going on, right? You assume it's still the right one, but we don't know. I agree with you. It's probably just blisters or whatever. The odds of him re-injuring or tweaking the surgically repaired scar this far out is insane. They wouldn't even let him play if it was that unstable. So really? I'm not overly worried about that. He's not going to have the same level of explosiveness. Didn't really have a whole lot to begin with, at least at this stage in his career. Remember, he's 40, so a little bit more challenging to kind of move. But if you compare this to, say, Cousins, I do not expect Cousins to look spry either. The difference between the two is that Cousins was a power leg, the rear leg, whereas Rodgers was just the front leg. So in terms of throwing, I don't think it's going to really affect him at all. Whereas I think as the offseason starts to come to a close, I'd be curious to see how Cousins is impacted. Does he have to put more oomph onto the ball from a shoulder or upper body perspective because he can't push off with that rear leg? Remember how poorly Joe Burrow did early last year when he had that calf strain. He couldn't put anything into the ball, and that's just a calf. The issue with the Achilles reconstruction is you never get that calf back, ever. You can't. If anybody's ever had an Achilles reconstruction, you can see it from a mile away because one calf is always bigger than the other. Knees, you usually get back after an ACL. You can eventually get them kind of equal. But unfortunately, the calves are not the same. So it'll be interesting to see if Cousins is impacted or any of them really impacted. But I think both of them will be relatively mobile, enough to be mobile. And this injury isn't as bad per se as, say, a running back. We've seen Cam Akers. We've seen James Robinson. We've seen Donta Foreman. All of these guys looked dust, a year or two after. I think that's probably going to be, unfortunately, applicable to J.K. Dobbins as well. But the other thing that is fascinating is the last time we had an Achilles tear in a quarterback that I'm aware of was Vinny Testaverde.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
And before that, it was Dan Marino. That's the only two historical references that if I'm only going back 30 years or whatever, but still, it's just an uncommon injury. Why did they both happen to two older white guys in 2023?
I don't know. It's crazy.
Hey, Doc, is it the fake watermelon or the fake chicken?
Or is it the Taco Bell and weed?
Well, we know Rodgers didn't have one thing that we could quote unquote rule out. But and that's a separate discussion. And there's more crazy stuff coming out about that. Oh, that's a separate topic for a separate day. But it's a lot of things. How many back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, or at least we'll say the 80s and 90s, how many quarterbacks were playing at 40?
Nobody.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Even in the 30s, they were like quote unquote old, right?
You were trying to get them out. Yeah.
And Marino played, I think, 4 or 5 more years.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of it's relatively common in men in their 50s, normal men. But no one's playing in their 50s, so that's kind of a moot point. So that's what, in terms of quarterback, what they're doing, the D ends, D lines, the running backs, different story. They're doing a lot more explosive work. That running, that quarterback should not be doing a whole lot of explosive movements.
But even with that, Doc, not to cut you off, it feels like to me, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I could be completely off. But it just feels like in the last 2 years, 2 seasons, we've seen like an increase in Achilles and calf type injuries.
Yep.
I don't understand what has changed. I mean, it's because our players just that much more explosive today than they used to be. I can't believe that. So what's the issue?
I mean, I'm not a draft expert guy in terms of numbers for combine and stuff, but I bet you if you compare the ones now to the ones 5-10 years ago, they're probably not a whole lot different.
Right.
If you're like, hey, we're beating in the times by 30%, 50%, okay, maybe I could just say, I'd be curious if Tim Riley, who's a high level, I think he trains like Jamar Chase and a lot of guys in Texas. I'd be curious on his perspective because he sees a lot of these high level guys, and I'd be curious to see if he has a reason for the pathophys. I personally think it's a lot of the issues with the food and issues with the chronic inflammation, your seed oils, all these heavy metals, pesticides, all this stuff is causing this chronic inflammation in the body. You can't see it. If go to Europe and eat carbs and see why you don't gain 10 pounds, and then eat the same food in America and see why you do gain 10 pounds. It's not 10 pounds of fat, it's 10 pounds of it's inflammation. And that's the problem. When that continues to stack, the body has no idea. It doesn't heal as well. You think the guys have better access to all of our what I call toys. Your red light, your PMF, the hyperbaric chambers, all this crazy stuff. They didn't have that 20, 30 years ago. Why are they getting more injured now? So something's not adding up, and that's the unfortunate kind of part about it.